On her 20th birthday, Alice's father died in an accident. A week later, her mother was found dead in her bedroom. She was suffering from a rare disease. She already had a little time left. But who knew she'd die by suicide rather than from that life-threatening disease? Alice was their only child. She was sent to India to live with her uncle at his home. This was her first trip to India. Her uncle and aunt lived in a small house. They did not have any children. Their neighbors knew nothing about them except that they had a meat shop in the neighboring village. Her uncle worked in another village and lived in the other. On her first day at her uncle's house, she noticed something strange. Their refrigerator contained nothing but meat. They did not seem to eat vegetables. On the sixth day, when she got tired of eating meat only, she asked her aunt if she could give her money to buy vegetables. Her aunt remained silent. The sound of the knife echoed throughout the house as she cut meat. Alice asked once more, but her aunt did not respond. She came closer to her aunt and touched her shoulder. She asked again but received no answer. Disappointed, she took a step back and went upstairs to her room. Her aunt came out of the kitchen and watched her closing her room's door. Then she went back in and began cutting the meat into small pieces. Alice peered out the window. She saw her uncle returning home. She ran downstairs and out the door. Even though it was the end of summer, the heat was unbearable. Her uncle was dragging a wooden cart. As he saw Alice, he left it there and walked towards her. He smiled and asked her why she was standing outside. Alice told her that she was waiting for him to return home. Her uncle laughed and asked if she had any special requests. She told him that she couldn't eat meat anymore. Her uncle's face got blank. His eyes darted to the side and a smile appeared on his face. A mysterious air surrounded him. He looked at her, but she gave no indication that she was suspicious of him. They appeared strange to her from the start. Her uncle took out some money from his pocket and handed it to her. He didn't say anything and went inside. Alice turned around, but before opening the door she looked back at the wooden cart. She saw a white sack on the cart. She thought about what could be inside the sack. She entered the house and took a plastic bag from the kitchen. Her aunt was looking at her. Alice told her she was going to the store to get some vegetables for herself. At the market, a young man was selling ladyfingers, cauliflowers, potatoes, tomatoes, garlic, ginger, and green peppers. She greeted him and asked the price of ladyfingers. The young man told him the price. As he put the vegetable in the bag, he told her he hadn't seen her before. Alice told her she was new to this city. Her parents died, so she came here to live with her uncle and aunt. The young man asked her who her uncle and aunt were. She told him that they owned a butcher shop in the nearby village. He was astonished when he heard that. But he said nothing about what he had heard about her uncle and aunt. He was thrilled by her beauty. He wanted to have a pleasant conversation with her. He wanted to get to know her. They talked for quite some time. When she was about to leave, he asked her if they would meet again. Alice smiled and left. He watched her walking away. Then he realized he forgot to ask her name. She didn't ask his name either. Alice tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. She knocked at the door. No one opened it. She knocked at the door again. She put her ear to the door and began to listen. She could hear someone inside. She wondered why her uncle and aunt were not opening the door if they were inside. Then the door burst open. On the floor, her uncle and aunt were laying dead. There was blood all over. She turned around, trembling, and began running fast, away from the house. The sky was turning dark. The clouds were covering the sky. It was about to rain. While running, she noticed 4 dogs fighting on the road. They looked very angry. She stopped and looked back. No one was following her. She was afraid that if she went down the same road, the dogs would attack her. She got off the road and ran across the empty field. Fine drops of water began to fall to the ground. The drizzle turned into a steady downpour as she reached the market. There were few people in the market. Suddenly, she heard a dog's bark. She looked behind and the dog was growling at her. She took a step back. As the dog ran towards her, someone threw a stone at it. The dog ran away. Alice looked to the left to see who had thrown the stone, but there was no one there. She glanced everywhere around her but couldn't see anyone. She felt someone standing behind her. When she turned around, there was no one there. Suddenly, someone grabbed her arm. She remained motionless for a moment. She raised her eyes and quickly looked to the left. The light flashed on her face. There were repeated thunderclaps. The window was open. The cold and wet wind was blowing the curtains. Raindrops landed on her face. Alice opened her eyes. It was very dark. She sensed something moving at some distance from her. She was lying on the floor. Her clothes were wet. She felt pain in one of her arms. But she did not move. Fear paralyzed her. Terror stabbed her heart. She wanted to close her eyes. Her eyes couldn't stand seeing anything horrifying. Suddenly the lights turned on. She shut her eyes. She felt something approaching her. As it got closer, her fear spiked. It was dragging its body along the floor. She felt it above her. She did not open her eyes. She was so terrified that she didn't want to see it. She thought if she did not open her eyes, that person or thing would go away, believing she was dead or non-living. She heard it picking something heavy off the floor. She opened her eyes slightly. However, she was unable to see anything. She opened her eyes a little more. As she noticed someone holding a big heavy iron material above her, she opened her eyes wide. After a few whacks, the silence prevailed. The exit door was open. A bird sat beside the stream of blood and began drinking it.